This is going to be pretty conversational.
Mm-hmm.
We do this fairly often. Generally, it's not recorded or in front of an audience. So, feel free to chime in if you feel like we're saying something that might be a little bit out of line. I don't think we're going to get there, but thank you. We kind of started this conversation last week when we went from Chelsea to here Saturday, and we were talking a lot about the color yellow. And we're talking specifically about the painting behind everyone right there, where you wrote yellow. How many times did you say it was?
I don't know, like 1,200 and something times. 1,218 times.
1,218 times.
There's more too, because I didn't put all of the paper in the painting.
What kind of paper was it? You said it was calligraphy paper?
Yeah, it's calligraphy paper that any of like the calligraphy paper that I have was picked up in Singapore.
Okay.
Because Sinray, my wife, is from Singapore, and so for Chinese writing practice. But this paper, I mean, the point that I was telling you about, the point being that you practice characters like on repeat over and over and over again to perfect your strokes. I was like, I was like, well, we don't really do that with one word in English, which I think is kind of like a why not situation. And how many strokes does it take to write yellow? I mean, you could debate that.
We were talking about it was probably somewhere between 8 to 10. 10 being the starting point if you do every individual line, and then 8 if you start to almost slur it a little bit. It gets closer to cursive.
Yeah, like when you're a little kid, you'd write a W in like 4 strokes, 1, 2, 3, 4. But adult, 1 stroke in it, for sure. I mean,
bigger question, why yellow? Why not purple?
Well, I honestly, I was thinking about this last night because after talking about it, I mean, I told you that I feel like I associate yellow with the built environment, like in cities, because it's it's a caution color. It's like a don't walk here color. I feel like a lot of construction zones will be employing yellow for different, like, watch out kind of moments in the zone. But also I think back to when years ago, I mean, in my early 20s or something, in Frida Kahlo's diary, she has like a clarification for what every color might mean culturally, but also how she feels about it, what it means to her, and what it makes her. And I just remember that she was like, yellow is madness, and it just is like the worst color ever, and it's pure like psycho color.
And you're wearing a yellow shirt today.
Yeah, that was actually not intentional, but not in terms of, I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna talk about yellow, let me wear a yellow shirt. But I did think that was kind of striking because I feel like yellow is also just like fantastic. It's like, I think it is really powerful. It also is a color that pushes energy out, like light. It sends light off of it. It doesn't like absorb, it reflects.
Do you agree with the characterization that yellow is madness, or you kind of just absorb that and like secondhand filter it through some of your thoughts?
Well, maybe I take her point, but I don't really think like I think it was more provocative to me than anything, maybe, because it just made me question for myself whether I think yellow is really maddening, which I don't think it is. But I mean, then there are also like, the association with Van Gogh and his relationship to yellow. It's like, oh, that dude was fucking crazy. So
I don't think that was yellow's fault though.
But it's because of all the absinthe, and it makes you see the world in yellow, apparently.
But the drink is green.
But it makes things yellow, evidently. I don't know. This is what they say, I think. But maybe don't quote me on that. But either whether that's true or not, that's what I've been thinking for years, is that he saw the world in yellow, and that was like, and he was also crazy. And so there's some other madness associations with it. But it's like a super powerful color as far as I'm concerned. Like the sun, you look at the sun and it's like, you just feel like this is yellow. Like when a sunny day in my head is like New York drenched in like a veil of yellow.
Yeah, it's like the Spike Lee movies where it's like Dead August. It has the like sepia tone to it, and just like everyone's having a terrible time.
Yeah.
It's hot as hell.
Yeah.
But it's also, would you say that yellow is the color that you use the most in this exhibition?
I think it is like I mean, it is a highlighting color. I think of it had one other major association with yellow is its stationary function, like a highlighter. I mean, so much of my writing is like
stationary based
and notational, annotational, marginal writing. I actually don't use highlighters that much, but I do use yellow Sharpies because they have a similar function, but they like kind of ruin the paper in a different way. It's a little bit more exciting to me. And but so I think that so much of like the illuminating the edges of the paper probably comes from this relationship to like stationary materials.
When you talk about illumination, do you think of manuscripts when you're painting these works? Like, do you think of like, I don't know, Persian, like Mughal miniatures and like the literal illumination of like using gold inlay to create a border, but you know, maybe with a yellow Sharpie?
Yeah. I mean, basically, yes. I feel like we've spoken about how a year and a half ago when Sid and I went to Singapore for the first time together, and then we went to Kuala Lumpur and visited the Museum of Islamic Art there.
You mentioned that, yeah.
And I mean, it just like was amazing. It was an incredible like place to walk around in. I think in New York we're like super spoiled with so many, so much incredible art here and incredible collections of work from all over the world, however it got here. But we have it here, so now we get to look at it. But we don't have nearly as much Islamic art here. We're just not, it's so not, like, I feel like it's not valued and prioritized here. The Museum of Islamic Art in KL was amazing. And two things really like stayed with me. One, there was a whole room of paintings, really big paintings, a dark room, and all of the paintings were backlit. It was like the canvas was stretched over a light box. And so the material, a lot of calligraphy-based imagery, but the imagery on the surface, I mean, it had this like, the way that when things are backlit, they're illuminated from the back, but there's also this kind of higher contrast around the edges. There's almost like a darkening at the same time that happens, which I think it's like when I illuminate the edges of the paper here, the pink of the paper looks darker because of the illumination around the side. But it also creates this like idea that it's being illuminated behind, you know, and that we're seeing the edges of that illumination on the paper. And that's how these paintings in KL struck me. And I was also just like, this entire room, all of the paintings are backlit. Like, I guess this isn't like I don't know if it's a curatorial decision. I don't really know enough about the work or the context of that technique, but it was really interesting and beautiful to see. And then the other thing was Quranic manuscripts and the Quran and Arabic calligraphy was just like, they just had like 2 rooms of just paper with writing on it. And that was the work, that was the art. And I was just like, this is perfect. Like, this is beautiful.
When you talk about Quranic writing, do you think of, this is maybe a little blasphemous, your own writing and like that transition between like writing as a work on paper and that being closer to drawing than, you know, poetry being viewed as almost like a separate category? Because we've spoken before as you're thinking of like poetry and painting as a sort of oneness. And so I'm wondering where those categories, if they even exist, might blur together for you in a way and how you filter and process those ideas, or if you just, you know, bang it out and you're like, word, I did that.
No, I mean, I feel like it took a long time. Like, I feel like it just took years in the studio to get to a place where the paper that I just have laying around that I collage on and write on, and I brought these for this purpose if it came up, because none of this is really like, you know, the conversation topic in terms of where it goes isn't really planned. So, but yeah, I mean, these things, like I would have, like these are a good example of just like poems that I draw all over or cross stuff out and re-annotate and go back over and then retranscribe later. And then eventually I was just like, I love these. Like this is the drawing.
But my question, I guess, is like, how do you get to this drawing? Because this is printer paper. So you've had a digital document that you've printed this onto, and then you decide to annotate on top of this. Like, where is the start? Is the start in like one of these notebooks?
Nah, the start is just the poem in the Google Doc.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Separate.
Yeah, totally separate. Yeah, no, the poem was not composed for the visual result.
No, I don't think of it as a composed for the visual result, but I think of it almost as like, if it's in the Google Doc, it's kind of like a valve you turn on and off. You're like, let's throw in a little bit of poem. Let's turn off the poem. And when we've talked previously about your sketchbooks, and especially these pink ones, which have a really great name, they're called Roaring Spring.
Beautiful.
And
poetry.
Most of the paintings here have several, if not most of them, like the underpainting is composed of just like sheets and sheets of these that you've torn off. And so my idea was that the poem started both here on the Roaring Spring and then kind of made its way into this format and then back into the painting. But the way you're talking about it now is a separate sort of avenue.
No, I mean, it's definitely not one or the other. It goes both ways, I would say. It goes all the ways. It does something. I mean, most of the poetry starts just in a little notebook that I forgot at home that I also typically have on me. Most of the writing does start on paper as like little things that I like just write down like on the street or like as I'm falling asleep at night is like right next to my bed, and I write like the most deliriously like dumb things right as I'm falling asleep, and they're like great. They're genius. No, but they're just fantastic because I wake up and I'm like, what? Where did that come from? And I mean, so they start like when I'm out in the notebook, and then I transcribe in the Google Doc things that I've like collected and amassed in my notebooks for like maybe months. A lot of the times I'll eventually sit down and do like a huge transcription day, and then I'll print out and be drawing and editing on the paper, and then I'll eventually go back to the Google Doc when I actually make edits that I appreciate, although a lot of the time I forget. But you know, there's plenty, there's examples where I just like, I'll print out a poem, like cross out the whole thing, and the result is like a drawing that I'm interested in. But the poem, as far as the poem is concerned in and of itself, means that I might be going back into a Google Doc and just like destroying that poem.
Interesting.
Or just completely rewriting it.
Do you feel like sometimes your paintings have that element of transcription and like you can see the going over in the layers of it? I'm thinking of that one to the left of us, to everyone else's right, for example, where you can almost see the editing process. Do you feel as though compositionally it is structured in that way, or kind of happenstance looks like it is structured that way?
No, I think it is. I mean, it's kind of like a coping mechanism to deal with like, the pressure of painting or something, like for myself, in terms of like building and developing the image. Like at the point in which like I let the painting become revision as the end game in and of itself, it feels freer to me. I mean, it's where some surprise comes in too. Instead of like remaining fixated on a like predetermined outcome for the painting, I let it kind of fuck itself up.
I guess if revision is the end game, where do you stop? Because you can functionally keep on going. You can just keep on working it over and over.
Just vibes. Just vibes. I mean, sometimes it feels like a little bit more clear cut. The yellow one, like to organize the surface material as like a kind of built-in system that meets the edges of the stretcher bars, meets the edges of the canvas, and creates this like this vertically orientated composition. It just means that I'm working within sort of like almost like building parameters that help delineate why and when I would stop painting. It like met the limits of the space.
Interesting. So some of these, let's go back to materials. Some of these are on linen and some of these are on board. Is there a preference for the various layering materials that you use when you go for a different substrate? Like when you have a painting on linen, are you more likely to go for the paper towels as an underlayer than maybe with the wood where it could bubble almost? Like, is there that consideration as you're going forward, or no?
Well, I think I probably won't be getting bored very often. I'll take materials as I find them, meaning like either...
No pun intended. Won't be getting bored very often.
I was like, did I just say something crazy? But
no, you made a great joke.
I mean, most of the time, I'm getting materials from Craigslist or something. I'm not too picky, basically. I've had a lot of the wood panels came from Materials for the Arts on a fantastic haul with Cassandra Mayela Allen, who gave me the in, and we went. I picked up like 30 panels. So that was my work for like a year, and I gave a bunch to Kiko. And I mean, that's just being real about it. Like if I can get materials for free, I'm gonna work on that material. But as far as how that determines what I do with it, it does change how I work. I mean, I do a lot of dry brush on linen. That I feel no. I mean, it does change how I work, but I guess, no. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just doesn't change how I work.
Doesn't it? Okay.
Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I have to think about that.
We can come back to it. We got time.
I prefer the fabric.
You prefer the linen?
Sentimental.
Okay.
I'll take whatever I can get.
Take whatever you get. But still sentimental. Like, if someone gave you some nice stretch linen or a piece of board, like, is both free. You get both, of course, but you might gravitate more towards the linen than the board.
Probably do the board first because I like it less. Yeah. I mean.
Okay. Trying to think of where to go.
Well, what about you? Because you have a pretty distinct relationship with materials. You destroy and compress materials a lot.
Yeah, I like working with stuff that already exists because I think a lot of people do a bad job with what they've done. And the editing process is fun. There's also the snarky commentary of, I'm doing your thing better than you are doing. But this isn't about me, it's about you.
Well, I feel like it could go anyway.
It can go anyway. But let's talk more about the paintings. I guess I have a bigger question. Do you have a pantheon of people that you return to when you're painting? Like, do you think of almost as like people that are walking alongside you? I think a crasser way of phrasing this is like, who are your imaginary friends?
Yeah. Yes. And this, like, you know where I'm at with this, but
they don't though.
They don't. Not everybody does. But I mean, I was just saying to Bryce and Vin actually over there that I feel like I spend a lot of time with certain artists, and then I'll like kind of rebuff just for because I need to like look at other things. I mean, I spent years looking at that Bryce Martin tome, plain image. And
the MoMA retrospective catalog?
Is it? I don't know.
The really fat one?
Yeah.
With the white cover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not who I would go to now, but it was like, I feel like he was pretty much out in the studio, like a reference point that I was constantly returning to for like maybe 3 years. I think the one who stayed though, who I still go back to consistently in between and around everybody else, is Jack Whitten in his studio notes. And partly because he worked completely different from me. His relationship to paint and materials was like down to reformulating and kind of rehacking the chemistry of paint to his own gains, to his own ends, in a way that I'm not trying to do. I think that that's maybe exactly what's very provocative for me, that when it comes to looking at his work, but also how he would write about it. His studio notes from the woodshed is like, that to me was like just sitting with that and checking in with it every day in the studio, especially when I didn't know what to do, was company. Like, that was good company.
Do you still check in with it?
Yeah, not as much, but I mean, I was pretty blown when I finished it. It's really big. And it was sad because You know, he writes basically right up to his death in 2018. I don't think I had a copy. Well, I didn't have the copy, but the book didn't come out until after his death. I wasn't even aware he was alive, I think, until maybe 2019. Or maybe right before he died, I can't remember. But it's weird to read through this guy's whole life in the 4 years after he passed away, 4 or 5 years after he passed away. I was sad to finish it. But it was company, but it also kind of felt like my MFA. Like I was like, this is like, if you really dig into his relationship to the work, and I mean so much of what was valuable about it was the relationship to the work itself, regardless of what he was doing technically or formally, creatively, it was this just hell-bent fixation on returning to the studio and moving forward and innovating. I think his shit was really about innovation and talking about what to do about painting for painting. And I mean,
I think his innovation was also technical.
Super technical.
Do you take anything from those technical innovations?
I mean, for me, it just felt like I had to graft his dedication to technical innovation to what I have felt like is more of my own relationship to innovating how I would see text and image working together in the process of writing and painting, or painting, writing, looking at painting as the same as writing, and painting and writing as the same as painting.
You are the developer.
Right.
For people that don't know, Jack Whitten would use this really large broom that he would call the developer to scratch the surfaces of his paintings to create
gallons of paint across the surface in one fell swoop. But he called it the developer because it was a reference to image, photography. One click, the photo develops inside. I mean, then you develop the photo, but the photo's taken. But his whole thing was paint faster than just be that's the painting. And I mean, that was his innovation. My innovation, I'm less concerned about innovating for the whole world or of painting and writing. It's more just myself finding what makes sense to me. I mean, also in my early 20s, the amount of older artists that told me oh, you got to pick one, poetry or painting, was infuriating. And I always felt, it just pissed me off. I was like, well, everyone knows that's not true. You don't have to pick one. That's just not true. That's not how that works. Everybody admires the people just do their thing. So I got to do my thing, but it's got to feel like me. I'm not going to make word paintings like Ed Ruscha. And I'm not going to be Basquiating all over the place with oil stick. They did their thing. I got to figure out how to make English happen in painting differently, or Spanish, or Chinese writing practice for 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference for which texts appear in your paintings? By text, I mean language. Do you feel kind of when you're starting, this is going to be a more English heavy one, this one's going to be more Spanish heavy, this one's going to be more Chinese heavy?
I mostly, no. I don't know why I'm smiling. I feel like I'm just whatever I'm doing the most of, I'm mostly writing in English, and now I'm doing a lot of work with Spanish because of, in my program at the Graduate Center, I am reading and writing in Spanish. So now I'm just doing a lot more of Spanishing. And I feel like that means that it just means that it's whatever I've generated material with. So now my notes are very Spanish based. So inevitably in the next year or two, paintings will show up with a lot more Spanish because I've just made more Spanish. I have more of a Spanish trace in my life. When I was taking Chinese lessons and I bought all these books for how to practice your characters for 3 and 4-year-olds in Singapore, I have all these Chinese writing notes. I have a lot less now, but for a period of time, there's a lot, and they were really cute. I'm not really progressing in Chinese, as it turns out, so there's probably going to be less Chinese for a while. But it is more of a function of what I'm actually doing, not really. I'm pretty much at no point have I been oh, let me make a Chinese language painting, or let me make a painting that's more French or something. It's more this is what I have.
It's just it's what's around.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the translation aspect? Going back and forth? How often do you incorporate those drafts? Because I know that you also do lots of translation for yourself we bonded over that very on a couple of years ago, where you're interested in this book called La Bestia Ser, and I managed to wrangle a copy from you when I was in Chile, which was a
Best
ridiculous
gift ever.
Yeah, ridiculous thing to do. I think I'd known you like less than 3 months at that point.
Really good gift.
How often do you like work with translation, or do you think about translation when you're working through your paintings and your drawings, or do you think even of translation as its own drawing?
Yeah, I feel like that's a great question, and I think so much of involving painting and text in each other, I have thought about as a form of translating across medium, translating, and maybe it's not really like a thesis or a declaration. It's not that I am translating text into image or translating painting into something else. I don't think that's I don't think that's literally what I'm doing. It's more a way of thinking through the disciplines, between and unifying the disciplines of writing and painting, like creating like a singularity in them.
Breaking down the walls.
I think maybe considering translation as what I'm doing has been a lens through which to view that process. And yeah, a way of carrying over.
Interesting.
Carrying one thing into the other thing.
I specifically said breaking down the walls because there are lots of bricks in some of these paintings. And I was wondering if you think of those as like bringing back up some of the walls.
Well, I think also, honestly, it's a question about like what are we doing when we reference something, and especially when we're referencing something in painting or in poetry without it being super explicitly representational across the image, but you adopt certain representational moments. It's always, in my head, I'm like, this is maybe a way of interpreting, which is very close to translating and used instead of translating when we talk about interpreting the world around us.
Hermeneutics.
And what does that mean?
It's like the art and science of interpretation.
Okay.
It's like the academic field of like, how do you interpret things? Like, what are the criteria we use to interpret things?
Yeah. I was thinking about this a lot last year when I've always been super, Martin Wong is another painter, a New York painter whose work has been really influential for me, you know that, and especially his relationship to painting text in the skies of New York City, of like a New York in the 80s, representing New York in the 80s, and also the different iterations of language that he was involving in the composition, not just like English or Spanish, which he would leave untranslated typically in his paintings, even though he himself didn't really speak Spanish, but he was mostly bringing the language in from like poets and just like homies around him in the scene back then, especially the work of Miguel Pinheiro. So Wong was painting English and Spanish words. He was painting ASL, sign language, which you don't paint. Sign language is not painted as hands, but he was painting hands. He was painting the signing alphabet, the hand alphabet, the lettering with your fingers, the finger lettering alphabet in ASL. And he was painting graffiti too. So there were all these different ways that he was transcribing and interpreting like a very distinct like Lower East Side New York in the 80s that was just loaded with visual language, like loaded with language all over the place. It's something that I think about a lot. Whenever I'm painting bricks on some level, it feels like an homage. It is working through an homage to Wong. It's also an homage to like a New York that's quickly becoming less brick. Not that they'll ever fully be gone, but I was just Googling how to become a bricklayer. You have to go to the New York Department of constructionjobs.com or something like that, but there's ways to apprentice and do it. But I think that it's his relationship to interpreting that visual environment, which was so loaded with language, really pointed out to me like, oh right, we are constantly involved in a moving through the world that is also being stimulated by reading, like at every turn. And so there is we like think about the distinction between the image and the word especially like in a Western context when we're not writing with a pictographic language. But this distinction is like, it's a moot point. There's language all the time in our field of vision constantly. And our relationship to whether we're like actively reading or just kind of perceiving and moving by it is like, it's a constant, it's automatic. So, I mean, that's been super helpful in terms of how to think about composing a painting with paper. Has felt a lot more like building in the painting. And it feels totally related to like the built environment around us for me. It's been kind of how I can like reason with structuring the image.
Interesting. Do you think of your work then and its textual components of almost a way of getting people to pay more attention to languages in their various forms, and that, you know, painting is a language, a visual language, but that writing is also a visual language, and that by melding the two, there's a certain thing that happens in your brain where like, I'm used to doing one or the other, not both at once, and it kind of slows you down and forces you to pay attention to a work?
I am interested in dissolving the distinction between looking and reading. I'm not really interested in like being didactic about it and telling people how to.
What about the distinction between seeing and reading? Or do you see the two as coterminous?
I think my feeling is that there's always the possibility to see and read when looking at these paintings, and that's where my work for me feels like I've finished a work. It feels successful when I'm like at that place with it, and I'm like, there's multiple interactions I'm having with the composition. That basically is how I would feel about people interacting with the paintings, that you chill with it for a little while, and if you linger in front of it, you eventually kind of arrive at a similar way of interacting with the work, where you could just like look, and the text functions as this visual information on the surface, but it doesn't have to be legible. But the potential for legibility is always there, like latent in the work. Or illegibility, because sometimes my handwriting is just like crazy. But
I mean, that one's also like seriously shellacked. Like half of it is illegible.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy that puzzle that you leave for people, where you're like, try and read this?
100%.
It's like breadcrumbs, but you're also kind of like fucking with the breadcrumbs. You're like shooing half of them away. You know, you're throwing some in the wrong direction. You're like,
Well, I feel like it's kind of fun. Like if you want to just like, you could find something or nothing. But I think I'm into that. I mean, I think that there's a kind of like almost paranoid relationship to the information in the painting when it's like less visible. It's like, what could be in here? I say paranoid also partly because sometimes after a work like the pink one here, or like this one where a lot of the text has been partly obscured, partly covered, like blotted out, re-texted over. I mean, I lose track of what was what, where things went, and how they became different. And the fact is that they're like super exhibitionist in a way. I mean, these are all like the material on here. The fact that the poems are very personal, but also what's not poetry is like my taxes, outstanding invoice information I'm writing down for myself, for my jobs, random, just completely unrelated, notes and thoughts, and these things that are essentially just personal, like private life. I mean, our address all over the place. I like try to cross out our apartment number, things like this. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't leave the whole shit out there. I forget. I'm like, oh shit, is my social security number in there? I hope not. But
that one you should cross out.
Yeah, I try to. I mean, I'm sure it's probably easy to find probably easy to find anything these days. But I mean, I try to. I don't really like Sinre's name being like super abundant in the paintings, because I'm like, that's private. Like, fuck, don't look at my wife. Like, get out of there. But
at the same time, you said it's exhibitionist. You're trying to show that.
Yeah, but I think it's just I'm not like, let me make a painting that's me naked in here. Like that's not what I mean.
Have you tried that?
I'm good. No, it's not really. That's not really what I mean by exhibition. And I think it's just that there is a lot of information.
Yeah,
so the
100%.
latent potential for, basically like, kind of revealing a life or chunks of a life is just always there, whether you read it or not.
Are they diaristic?
Yeah, some of them like kind of by accident.
I was about to say like accidentally.
Yeah.
Just by virtue
I'm not
of
like
the material.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, thus far, they're the ones that are organized, like the pieces that are organized around like a concentrated assortment of poem information or papers, typically are because the painting itself is like a representation of one poem's entire process. Otherwise, the notes together, I am not too discerning about what textual information is arranged with other text, except for maybe occasionally I'm like, oh, maybe this in terms of decision making, sometimes it feels like something is speaking to another thing. Mm-hmm. They work together. Otherwise, it's more, the decision more takes place around like the visual, and if they work together, if they kind of cohere visually, like bringing many pink pages together, and if they kind of can exist side by side, then that's okay.
Okay. How often do you return to your works before you consider them finished? Like, do you have a pretty serious like rereading process almost, or is there more of the instinctive, this kind of feels like it's about where it needs to be, hopping off the train kind of feeling?
I try not to overthink it. Yeah, I try to be more gut feeling about it. So if like once I finish, most of the time when I feel like I finished something, I try to just get it out of there, just get it away for a little while, and then maybe come back to it. But there's a lot of work that I finish and just don't feel particularly interested in when it's done, which is partly why I like give myself distance. It's really, really uncommon that I finish a piece and I'm like, yes, hell yeah. Like I'm not.
You're not that jazzed about it.
I'm not
afterwards?
really very excited typically. Like at first it just.
Does it feel like a relief when you finish a painting, or is it kind of like a big sigh and then you're on to the next?
I gotta say, it sounds like so unfun talking about it this way. Because I'm not really like.
I've seen you in the studio. You're having a great time. In the
Yeah, I
studio.
am, but I'm not really like beating my chest at the end of a painting. Like typically.
Okay.
Like it's just not how it feels. A lot of the time, if it comes together cleanly, like it feels like if the painting felt easy to make, but it's like resolved at the end, I'm like, well, that shit was too easy, so that's just can't be that good. And then if it feels like it took months, sometimes the work comes together very quickly, and then sometimes it takes like literally just it's sitting on the wall for months, or I'm like taking it up and down for like an entire year maybe, and then maybe I finally finish it. I'm like, oh wow, I really didn't think that's how that would feel okay. And by the time it's over, I'm just like, ugh, that sucked. I mean, but it is more about being surprised by the work. And that's probably where the feeling of resolve comes in to some degree. Like less about me feeling sure about how it should look and how the end result should be. If I feel sure about it, I'm almost definitely, it's not good. It's already dead. Like it's already just not a good piece.
Okay.
And at the point that something has surprised me, there's been like an accident, or there's been like a surprise component, or I like dwelled on it for too long and then I had to leave it for a while and then I come back and something presents itself with at some new angle. At the point of surprise is when things can start to click into place and the painting kind of becomes its own thing. And it becomes new information for me. That's why surprise is important, because it's new information. It's not like I knew what I was doing all along. Was it you who said in the studio recently, Rauschenberg said, if you think you know what you're doing in the studio, you're already wrong?
I think that was Basie.
Basie said, I was like, thank fucking God somebody said that, because I never know what I'm doing. I'm just like, I mean, if that was the point, then I mean, then I've been just like floundering the entire time, you know. But I think also Dinesh Smith, the poet who has a podcast, or he used to be on this podcast called Verses with Franny Choi. I don't know. Remember this poet's name? Fanny Choi? But in the podcast, he says, like, if the poem doesn't surprise me, this poem has no soul. And I mean, he was talking about how if he already knows what the poem's about, it's like no use writing the poem. It already exists somewhere, so it's dead in the water. It resonated a lot with me. It's exactly how I feel about poem that's just being a poem, and a painting being a poem, painting. I mean, all of this, that's how I feel about all of it. It's like if there's no element of surprise at some point, as the kind of painting turns and there's something that shows me something I couldn't predict, then
not worth doing.
It's not worth doing, yeah.
On a completely different note, what's your relationship like to action painting? Because there's two paintings in particular. I'm thinking of the one behind you right here and the one that's on that wall, which were referencing a potential break-in at your apartment.
We thought someone tried to break in, but they didn't get in. They just fucked up the door frame, but it was unconfirmed. So I don't know. But
they're also like the paintings that have like the largest brushstrokes.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a like literal line between the energy that you felt in that moment and then when you're trying to almost diaristically recount it later, or like this is kind of what breaking in feels like? Or is it not so literal and you were just kind of having fun with the brushes and you tiled them because that's what you're thinking about when you're working on them at that time?
I don't know. I think probably the second part, not so literal, but at the same time, I'm like, maybe these are, because to me, the painting on the front wall, the first painting when you walk in, that's the oldest painting in the show. It's from 2023, and that's called Someone Tried to Break Into Our Apartment.
With two exclamation points.
With two exclamation points. In a way, I think it's almost like the most representational painting, because it is, I feel like whether I don't really think I was like, let me make a break-in painting, but I think that at the point that I recognize that in the painting, it's like that's representing this feeling.
Is it the only painting in the show without any text?
The one right next to it is no text, called
Suspicion is the Mood.
Suspicion is the Mood.
What was the process behind having two paintings without text?
First of all, I think we need to kind of close up the. Really? Yeah, we can open up to some like questions
for sure.
In a minute. But I think, those two paintings are really, really important to me because they're the last two paintings I made before it happened like really a switch flip. Like I really just threw collage into, I had always been collaging as a kind of back end of the practice, feeling like this is a way to visualize and not, I had always demoted it, not thought about it in terms of like making work to finish work. It wasn't until I was in Singapore the first time, like a year and a half ago, and I was away from the studio for 2 months and just hanging out with Sin's family and, not making stuff. But always writing and reading, collecting a lot of material, doing some Chinese writing practice. Then in like the last 12-ish days of that trip, I just I think I also was maybe like kind of ready to get back to the studio a little bit, although Singapore was fantastic. But I bought a lot of small canvases and just started collaging the canvases. Like I cut everything up and I made these tiny works that are like the size of cigarette packs, and they're like the best things I ever made. They were fantastic. I loved them, and they also really showed me it made me question immediately why I'd always seen collage as something that wasn't maybe the main thing in a way, the main way to think through building the image, composing the image. Anyways, those two paintings in the front are like the last two paintings that I made before I really started collaging. And seeing collage as the way to literally involve text into the image. Because up to that point, I spent my 20s seeing poetry and painting as completely involved and intertwined. But it was also more of a theoretical relationship to me. It was like a co-influence, but it was more emotional than it was like
Literal.
and represented in the paintings themselves.
Word?
Yeah.
That's a great place to end.
Yes. So.
Does anyone have any questions? That's. You sure, Isaac?
On Bounty paper towel? Sure. How do you feel about Bounty paper towel?
Oh, not that great. It's expensive.
It's the good stuff.
Why Bounty? Why not Braun?
It's the best at absorbing. It just is the best.
Literally, like the ads are real. Like it's literally the
After
bigger
using a
picture.
lot of different paper towels to mop up acrylic paint and redistribute it as like a print, it's the best by far. You're getting the most bang for your buck. Don't play it with these other shits. You're just wasting your money. I'm sorry. I can definitely say I'm kind of an expert in the paper towel game now.
Okay.
You tried my bamboo.
It's bullshit, is what they're. They're nowhere near as good. I can tell you that much. The bamboo is amongst the worst, but the recycled paper towels are by far the worst. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, we have a bunch of Bud Light and. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Christelle.
Did you say that the pieces with a lot of poetry, it's one poem you're working through that we're seeing the process of? Is that what you said?
Actually,
think
most of the time.
Most of the time.
When it's like printer paper poems, it's like one poem.
So like, I'm wondering about, because you have this thing about revision,
Mm-hmm.
and the relief of like, because as a writer you can bang your head against the wall like working on something. Like, I'm wondering about the relationship between painting and poetry for you. Is it like when you get stuck on a poem, you're like, all right, I need to like pull it
Yeah.
out, or like, and then does the poem have a finish point? Like, does it come out of this painting a poem, or is this the final form that it was meant to have?
Yeah, I think that's.
I think that depends. You've shown poems before, just like in painting shows.
Just
Yeah,
like
but
a
is
straight
this
up.
poem a poem, or is this poem this piece?
Yeah, I think that's a great. I mean, to me, I'm like, this poem as it became the painting is now like a one-of-one version of this poem. It's an iteration of it, but the like poetry in this piece is a later stage version of the same like chain of poems in that work back there, which still exists in the form of a pretty extensive Google Doc. So I mean, after the visually editing like this on the paper is a way to take it out of that computer process and bring the poem into it brings it into like the physical, into like a materialization that I can work on in a different way. So it influences like how I edit, how I think about the piece, how I think about the poem itself. And then I take those edits that I've done visually and like bring them back to Google Doc. But this, as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, this is like a one-of-one. Like, no, like whatever the text in here as it would like show up in a finished poem later, which would be in like a collection of poems or in a magazine or something. I think it would at that point be very related but distinct from the poem as it became like, yeah, it's like a hybrid thing. Yeah. Okay.
Back in 2016, after the election, you were pretty angry, and you put together some art,
Okay.
which we wore.
Okay.
And
It's me,
going
Dad.
Back to the Max question about walls and bricks, and
Yeah.
bricks, railway lines, and communication and anger. There was a lot of anger in that. So going back to some of the representation of questions that were there, if you think about those angry times and the art that you produce, and then think in other ways of producing more art through those times, is that something you could come back to communication? Because you asked the question about communication through art and poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be doing more?
Well, I think I mean, I feel like, I think, back in, because the piece that you're talking about, the work that you're talking about, I was in college, I guess in undergrad, and 2021, I was 20 and 21 years old. And I think really looking for ways of representing like a lot of stuff. I was making drawings. I mean, it was a form of collage too. I was drawing from newspaper clippings and drawing like the built environment, drawing like, there was a lot going on. I mean, Trump was just elected for the first time. I was drawing like political figures and like police officers. I think I was like looking for a way into kind of depicting frustration more literally than I am now. Now, I'm not as fixated on like depicting the feeling or like accessing the feeling to find the painting as much as I am like the painting just becoming its own thing, but like just leaning in more seriously into, or just more wholeheartedly into just what I want to see happen visually. And I think a lot comes from that without intending to make like an angry painting or something, Yeah. Izzy.
I just have a question about how this practice of kind of composing your revisions has changed your writing practice, or like if you are revising poems and thinking ahead to it maybe being a part of a painting, or like kind of trying to create like a visual composition out of the revision while you're revising, or is this something that you just is kind of still separate in your mind and then you're like collecting from the wreckage of your revisions to create these?
I mean, now that there's definitely a self-awareness around like how revision may inevitably be an essential visual component to building up the painting, or to involving itself in a painting. So there is like, that also like opens the door to like a playfulness in terms of revising. Like no one revises like that. That's crazy. You don't need to write in 5 different Sharpies on your poem to understand what you need to change about it. I mean, maybe, but it does, like, at this point, there is both a function and a play that's happening when I'm doing that. I mean, yeah, I think that, but at first it started as distinct things. And at this point now that I've kind of fostered basically a relationship between revision as like a visual end game in and of itself. Now there's like this space to play in the act of revising that I am aware is providing visual material and has potential to be the painting. It's like it often, a lot of the time, as like if I get more like kind of ornate and like flourishy with how I'm like writing in the margins of a poem, I'm like, this feels like painting. Like this is replacing a lot of what I do with instead of like, I'm not really using a brush as much, but I am like drawing and like.
Revision is gesture.
Yeah.
Literally,
is
which
gesture.
is the subtitle of that painting.
Yeah. Yeah. Christelle.
I wanted to ask about the title of the show. And
Okay.
I don't know how to fold this in or if this will be part of your answer, but there's this thing about structures and cities that I feel like come up with the yellow, and like those to me look like construction lines and the floors that you're playing with and pushing on. And like it's very clear that you're a city boy writing, but can you contextualize the decline of reading for us?
Okay, glad you asked. The decline in reading. Well, evidently there's a decline in reading.
Literacy.
Yeah, literacy, but reading for fun specifically is way down. Handwriting, down. I mean, who writes by hand? Not that. But so the decline in reading for me is like, I mean, I do, but the title was to draw attention to reading in and of itself, and reading in terms of like, okay, this is a show of paintings, but to bring reading to the forefront of how you engage with the work is just something